Tim Cook reportedly called Pelosi to deliver a warning about Congress's antitrust bills.
Without objection.
So maybe it's the lobbyists, maybe it's the power of these very powerful CEOs making personal calls, but it could even be something more sinister. Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record a Fortune.com piece entitled Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband cashed in on big tech just as Congress was set to pounce.
Without objection.
And in that article, there's discussion of the spouse of the Speaker of the House making a $6 million call on stocks that netted $5.3 million while we're not moving these bills. This is my favorite subcommittee in my half-decade in Congress, and in no small part because of the way you've led it. I am incredibly proud of the work we have done to address some of these anti-competitive practices of these monopolistic entities. And I was particularly persuaded by the testimony of Mr. Gross regarding how that market power of big businesses like Amazon can limit the ability of workers to have any type of meaningful negotiation. Congresswoman Jayapal led legislation that the chairman of the committee, the chairman of the subcommittee, Mr. Buck, and myself supported that would force the breakup of companies like Amazon into smaller entities. And I wanted Mr. Gross's perspective on that. Do you believe, as a negotiator, that would improve the position of workers to break up companies like Amazon and other big tech companies into smaller entities?
Well, I'm not an expert on this field. You know, obviously I'm just a driver at UPS and a shop steward for my union. But what I would say though is that it might not necessarily be necessary to break up the size of the company, but just to allow or force the company or encourage the company to employ the workers that it's utilizing. So instead of using third-party individuals and leaning on them and chewing them up and spitting them out, have real employees, you know, give them real wages, allow them to have a collective bargaining unit agreement. And I think that way you would get more productivity out of them in the long run and still be able to run a successful business.
I appreciate that perspective. My concern is that if they're able to stay so big, even if we used the awesome powers of the federal government to force these relationships out of independent contractor relationships into employment relationships, they're still so big that they could reduce the contributions of those employees with the strength that they have. And it is one of the reasons why we had bipartisan support on this committee for those bills. But Mr. Chairman, I'm deeply disappointed that those bills haven't been called up for a vote. It seems a bit odd to be here talking about positive impacts of legislation the subcommittee has passed when the full House has had the opportunity in prior weeks to take up these bills and they haven't. And I have to wonder why that has happened. And so, Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record a piece from the New York Times entitled "Tech Giants Fearful of Proposals to Curb Them, Blitz Washington with Lobbying."
Without objection.
And so that could be a reason, the power of lobbyists in this town to make things tougher for workers. I guess there could be other reasons too. Mr. Chairman, I would seek to enter into the record a piece from Yahoo News entitled "Tim Cook reportedly called Pelosi to deliver a warning about Congress's antitrust bills."
Without objection.
So maybe it's the lobbyists, maybe it's the power of these very powerful CEOs making personal calls, but it could even be something more sinister. Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record a Fortune.com piece entitled "Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband cashed in on big tech just as Congress was set to pounce."
Without objection.
And in that article, there's discussion of the spouse of the Speaker of the House making a $6 million call on stocks that netted $5.3 million while we're not moving these bills. So I thought that was a little odd. I thought that was weird. We moved bipartisan legislation out of this subcommittee, and just as we're considering it, and it might be bad for big tech, the speaker's spouse goes and buys all this big tech stock, and then lo and behold, here we are with the bills not called up. And it just makes you wonder, did somebody know something? Was somebody acting on information? And it could have been the power of the lobbyists and all the money that they donate to members of Congress on both sides. It could have been people like Tim Cook calling, but here's what we know. These bills aren't coming to the floor. If they were coming to the floor, they would have been on the floor in prior weeks. And so now we sit here with this great work likely extinguished in its tracks for one of these unfortunate reasons. And Mr. Chairman, I know we've got Chairman Nadler's MORE Act coming up soon. And one thing we learned in the marijuana movement is sometimes you got to lose votes on the floor. Sometimes you got to put up the votes, you got to lose, and then year after year, you make a little progress, you get further down the road. And even if these tech bills can't pass, I would encourage you to talk to the speaker and put them up for a vote. And I know she said she won't put up votes that don't pass, but if it could at least give us a measuring tool to be able to come back and work to persuade our other members. I thank the chairman for his indulgence for going over time, and I yield back.
But I am 100% committed to banning stock trading by members of Congress. So I'm not going to be dissuaded from that one way or another. And we can throw up as much chaff as you want to, but the fact of the matter is members of Congress should not be trading stock. They should not be. Congress is a rich man's club. That's the problem. That's what we're trying to fix. I would suspect that I probably have the fewest assets of anybody sitting on this dais. I am not a rich man, unlike those to my left. So, I mean, listen, the American people look at people like the former Speaker of the House, who makes better returns than anybody in America. They look at senators who were investigated during the COVID pandemic for their miraculous stock trades, and they say, how is this possible? To think that this might become a problem in the future is frankly fanciful. It's a problem now. It is, and it's not just in perception, it is reality. Members of Congress are trading daily based on information that the public doesn't have.
And now I'd like to recognize Senator Hawley for his comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for working so diligently on this and accommodating my many suggestions and concerns over a period of months to make this the strongest possible bill. I think it's a terrific bill. Senator Scott threatened me a moment ago that if I made a lengthy statement, we might lose his vote. So I will be extremely brief. I just want to point out that the historic nature of this finally getting to a vote. There's been a lot of talk about banning stock trading by members of Congress. Never have we been able to get a vote. We're going to get that vote today. And I just think that this is such a simple proposition. The American people, when I go home and I say to folks, they ask me about stock trading, here's the thing that absolutely stuns them. They can't believe that it's legal already. They can't believe we can currently do it. Most members of the public think it's already banned. And when I say, actually, it's 100% legal, they say, why? And there's no good answer to that question. We should be here to focus on the public's business, not private gain. We shouldn't be here day trading. We shouldn't be here focusing on our stock portfolios. We should be here doing what the American people sent us to do. And that's what this bill is about. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I came in here happy to vote yes on this self-flagellation. For my own part, what I did when I ran for office, I divested myself of all my marketable securities, turned them into cash. I've been sitting on cash. And you know how much I've lost in terms of opportunity cost since that point in time. So, from my standpoint, I was able to do that. I had the capability of doing that. And I thought that'd be the honorable thing to do. My wife has since purchased an ETF, which this does exempt, and I think that's a good thing. I would caution people in terms of, I'm going to vote no now. We don't want to turn Congress into a rich man's club. I think it's already suffers from that. And again, I thought also, and I would want clarification, it's mainly the reason I'm asking this, is are private businesses exempt or not exempt from this? I was told, again, it's hard to interpret legislative language, but if, I had a rather large manufacturing company, which I did not divest myself immediately, I since have, but that would be grotesquely unfair. We're going to limit the number of people, and by the way, qualified people. I actually want people with manufacturing experience or business experience. People who've been successful in life. I'd like to see successful people come to Congress and bring their successful skills to bear here. So, again, I agree with Senator Romney. Insider trading is already illegal. I don't know. I think there's all kinds of suspected abuse. A lot of people come into Congress and all of a sudden they're multimillionaires later. But I think we do need to exercise caution. But again, I'm primarily speaking at this point because I want clarification. Does this or does this not exempt a private company of somebody who's going to run for office or a member of Congress? I mean, all of a sudden, does that have to be divested? Because I think that'd be a travesty, quite honestly.
Is there an answer to that question?
The,
Have an answer?
yeah, the answer is that it's exempt if it's a small business as defined by the Small Business Administration.
So how small is small, defined by
500 and under.
500,000?
500 employees and under is a small business.
Definitely put me down as no.
So let me ask a question. So if you have 1,000 employees and you own it and it's just your private business, you have to divest of that business?
Yep.
Well, that's insane. I mean, who would want to do that? I mean, farms, family businesses have been going on for generations that they keep together, and sometimes families divide it by shares. We're going to make people divest of those privately owned businesses, and we think that's a good idea? I don't know. I mean, the thing is the popularity of voting for this to show you're against bad things is out there, but it's like, you know, one of the senators today said that no congressperson should enrich themselves from illegally obtained information. That's not what this bill's about. This isn't about illegal information. This is about owning stock. This means you're criminalizing everybody who wants to own stock. There's potentially a 27th Amendment violation in this too, with taking people's salary. That's being adjudicated before the courts currently. But to vote against this sounds like, oh gosh, you're for corruption. Nobody's for corruption. There are laws we passed, and I voted for the Stock Act a couple of years ago, and the Stock Act helped to ban or further ban what was already illegal. It has always been illegal to do insider trading for anyone in Congress or otherwise. With the Stock Act, I understand it is, we reaffirmed that. But I do fear that we're doing this, and I'm torn between the perception of how this vote will be and actually the how badly the bill is written of what it will do. And did any of the authors of the bill have a comment on whether this would require President Trump to divest? Senator Hawley, do you know what the answer to that is?
Divest from what?
Stocks?
I don't know what the state of the president's, the former president's current portfolio is. Whoever is elected president would have multiple years to comply. But I do know there's always an excuse for why we can't do a stock trade bill. I've heard this for years. And now we're being told, oh, this was drafted hastily. That's just simply false. I mean, we've worked on this for literally years. So I would just welcome those who now suddenly have concerns. Where have you been for the last few years? And listen, I'm happy to work with you as this moves to the floor. We can always do a substitute amendment. That's fine. But I am 100% committed to banning stock trading by members of Congress. So I'm not going to be dissuaded from that one way or another. And we can throw up as much chaff as you want to. But the fact of the matter is, members of Congress should not be trading stock. They should not be. And I know that there are those on this panel who have never supported and are never going to support a stock trade ban. And that's completely fine. That's your prerogative. But let's not pretend that this is about anything other than that. That's what this is about.
But what about banning of owning of your business? I got a family, I don't, but let's say I have a family business and it's got 1,000 employees and I own it. I have to divest in that? Do you think that's a good part of your bill?
Is that the current, Mr. Chairman? Listen, again, I'm happy to work with anybody who has concerns on substance, who would actually like to get to a result on this and thinks it will improve it on the floor. I'm delighted to work with you on it.
Can I make a suggestion which would solve this? Don't force divestiture. You run for office, you have a stock portfolio, that's it. Now, you can't trade it. Okay, you can't buy more stocks and trade stocks, so you want to run for, you can hold on to your stocks, okay? You can always divest, okay? You can always buy an ETF. Don't force people to sell their business. Don't force them to sell stocks they already hold. Don't force divestiture. Once you're here, you can't be buying and selling. Again, I don't do it. I did divest. I turned it all into cash, okay? So that's how I handled myself. I don't want to force what I did in everybody else, though. Not everybody's in my position. I don't want to turn Congress into Rich Man's Club. And by the way, I certainly don't want to impose this self-flagellation on other branches of government. We can do this to ourselves. I don't think we should do it to the executive branch or the judicial branch.
Can I just, Congress is a rich man's club. That's the problem. That's what we're trying to fix. I would suspect that I probably have the fewest assets of anybody sitting on this dais. I am not a rich man, unlike those to my left. So, I mean, listen, the American people look at people like the former Speaker of the House, who makes better returns than anybody in America. They look at senators who were investigated during the COVID pandemic for their miraculous stock trades, and they say, how is this possible? To think that this might become a problem in the future is frankly fanciful. It's a problem now. It is, and it's not just in perception, it is reality. Members of Congress are trading daily based on information that the public doesn't have. And now we've heard the insider trading. I understand that insider trading is banned, but let's be honest. Members of Congress get information that is technically not insider information as defined by the securities laws that is nevertheless extremely beneficial to know, and often we get it earlier than other people do. That's why senators rushed to trade stock at the beginning of the pandemic and were investigated for it. Ultimately couldn't be prosecuted because technically it wasn't a violation of the securities laws. Was it a good idea? No. Should it be happening? I submit that it should not be. So again, I just want to say to anybody who would like to support this bill but says I have concerns over technical aspects of the drafting, I hear you loud and clear, and I'm happy to work with you on that.
Answering your question, former President Trump owns 114 million shares of Trump Media and Technology Group Corp., worth $3.776 billion. He would be required to divest that. All right? That would be at a massive disadvantage for him. Not to mention his other investments. So you have Senator Johnson has proposed, what makes a lot of sense, which is to say, if you have investments, you don't have to sell them to run for office. You can't trade. But I didn't say this bill wasn't drafted quickly or hastily. I said it was drafted poorly. All right, there are a number of things the bill does which ought to be done, which I would support. But causing people that are running for office, including the President of the United States, to have to divest of all their public and private enterprise securities is simply something that's a mistake and would prevent people from running from office, including the person who's the Republican nominee for president.